Now it's planning without percussion, but still active because there's some violence and movement here, so it's still in a high energy level. And I like programming. I know a little bit of it, just enough to understand it. When I read someone else's code, I know enough to get a feeling of what they're doing. Once you know that, I think implementing FMOD is pretty simple and easy. And when it's enemy turn, there's the other kind of percussion.
Hello, and welcome to another FMOD Deep Dive. Today, we're talking to Aleix Ramon and his adaptive audio composition for the game Iron Crown. Aleix talks about how he found opportunities in game jams, and we'll talk a little bit about how that led into paid projects. We'll also, of course, dive into his FMOD project, talking about the game states that he had to deal with on the game Iron Crown and the turn-based scenario that he found himself in. We will also this time get to have a quick look at the Unity project that Aleix was working from in order to test his music. And the other day I was talking to one of my coaching students about the topic of when should the workflow start for a game audio composer, like how far do you have to get involved in a project and where does it stop? And Aleix kind of answers that by saying every now and then we can get into the scripting. We can do a little bit of coding and a little bit of the engine implementation side of things as well. So in this video, we're going to go over a few of the things that Aleix had to write in the scripts in order to put his music into the game. By the way, if you are interested in coaching or game audio implementation learning in general, I do everything via my course FMOD Challenges. If you're looking to master game audio implementation and learn how to be creative and confident in game audio middleware such as FMOD, then this might be the course for you. You can check out the link in the description below for the explainer page that details everything that's involved in the course, and you can hear from other people who are already in it, benefiting from the community that I have created behind it. That being said, let's jump straight into the interview, and let's begin with hearing about Aleix's path and journey into game audio composition. Hi Aleix, how's it going?
Hello, nice talking with you. Thank you for having me here.
It's my pleasure. It's always nice chatting, and I'm glad that we can sit down and talk.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd love to basically know how involved is a composer like yourself in an indie game? Where does your workflow start and end, and maybe explaining a little bit about why?
Yeah, that's a good question. When should a composer start? That's a big question. I will probably say something that's a bit against what most people say, because you usually hear, or I usually hear people saying that the composer should come into the game as soon as possible. And I agree, but in a way, I think you should say something as soon as possible. You should be in the project as soon as possible to help them direct the project, or there should be at least someone, right? If there is an audio director above you as a composer, which in my case, there's never been one. I've always been the only audio person mostly. If that's the case, I think it's okay if there's only the audio director setting the direction. If there's none, you should be there helping them set the direction so that they don't come to you after having spent months or years making the game and being like, yeah, we never even thought about audio. We're gonna do something here, So that's not the best situation. Being there early is good. But at the same time, I think that, as we all know, like audio usually is on a bit farther down the line when there's other things in place. So it happened to me a couple of times that I was there from the beginning, but many times I found myself telling them, like, yeah, I could do something here, but you haven't decided on many other things of the game. So I have to wait for you to decide that because my work takes less time. There's this balance. Like I always hear people saying, yeah, come in as soon as possible in the game. I'm like, yeah, but not fully 100% into it, just like partly kind of in the role of an audio director in a way, more conceptually giving advice, I think. And then a bit farther down the line, like you get really into making it happen and creating the assets and all that.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. I think if certain things aren't decided on or thought about at the beginning of a project, it makes putting in the audio and the music later a lot harder. It puts less pressure on the client, especially if you're working with indies and it's the first time they've hired someone like us. Then you don't want to put pressure on them to start paying you but not be ready to give you all the work, because then that puts everybody in a stressful position. I'd much rather delay things. I don't know about you. And if I sense a little bit of hesitation, I'm like, maybe we should wait a couple months and then start. Like, there's no issue. I usually
Yeah, that's a good point.
right.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's a good approach. Actually, I learned that from Akash, whom you know, Akash Takar.
I'm gonna say the same
You know
thing.
that from him. Like if someone is like shopping around, like like asking you, hey, what's your budget, something, and here we go a bit into the topic of pricing, but yeah, that's always usually the best is to say, okay, are you really ready for audio? Like if you're not ready to start thinking about audio, like considering it seriously, just reach out to me later. If you're willing to really invest time and money into audio already, which is the ideal, then yeah, okay, let's talk about it. Let's negotiate and let's set the price, and then I will start helping you. Even if there's still a lot that I would do most of the work later, I would still start now working with you. I can build my schedules around the game. I can so that we know I will be available in the future. We can already plan how the audio is going to be. You already know you'll have someone. But if they are not ready for that and they're like, yeah, I still don't care about audio, I'm just asking for prices, as Akash says. Thank you, Akash. You're awesome. Just tell them to wait and come back to you when they're ready for it. Maybe ask them, when do you think you'll be ready for it? And then you reach out to them in a few months, whenever they tell you. Because, and in terms of pricing, that's the thing. Like they are a developer usually will be much more paying to pay for your services as a composer, sound designer, or any kind of artist when they really need them. If it's something in the future, they're like, yeah, whatever. It's not going to put much thought into it. Or if they really need it now, or they really want to have it already, that's when they're going to do a truly a commitment, an economic commitment to really pay you well for it.
I've been trying something lately where I send them a very basic asset list document, and I'll say, okay, cool, I'm glad that you're interested. Like, if you could fill in the sheet with basically like more or less the sounds that you're thinking about, doesn't have to be perfect. That is a really good kind of way of filtering people who are serious or not yet, because you'll find the people who are serious fill it up almost immediately. The ones who don't, wait a while. I'm like, okay, they're not ready. Like, if you want to start working, that's a good sign. That usually saves a lot of chasing up as well. Or
that's a good one.
making maybe them realize as well, right? Yeah,
I might steal that from you. There's another thing actually about that, like about filtering clients in a way. That's I think also like from Akash actually. Like I like everything I know. That's that's about saying, okay, I consider working with you, but you have to know in advance that I only work with clients who pay at least this amount. It's like the minimum amount that you need to work, even if it's a very small amount, like 1,000 or 2,000, whatever. Even like make it clear that that's not what it's going to cost, might cost much more, but the very minimum, so that at least you filter out people who are, I don't know, students or who really have barely anything. I mean, of course, unless you're really starting and you want to build portfolio and all that. But if you're farther in your career and you really only do this if you're paid properly, that can be also like a good quick filter. Just making sure in advance before spending hours like talking with them or in calls, like, okay, this is going to cost at the very least this X amount of money. 100%. But I actually like a lot your approach to of the assets. That's a very good idea.
I kind of send that after the initial chat anyway, where I kind of throw that price out, say, this is what I normally charge for X amount of work or 3 months of work or whatever. Because, and I think it's good. It's almost respectful for both sides. So you're not wasting each other's time. So they know that you're not if you're the right fit or not, like straight away, and you as well. You'd be like, okay, doesn't sound like I'm the right person. Like, and then you, I don't know, recommend a friend or somebody who's coming up behind you. Anyway, I don't want to talk about as interesting as this is an FMOD deep dive. So
I know, sorry. I was getting to that topic. My bad.
No, not at all. I did want to find out, like, how did you get your first project? Just on a final note about networking and like career building, like, how was your first project? How did it come into existence?
Yeah, so my first project. So I usually consider, it's hard to say actually, because my first commercial project was Evidence 111, which was, but it was an audio only game. And so to me, it doesn't 100% feel like the first serious proper project. I mean, it was a proper serious project, I mean, and it was great. And in terms of actually FMOD, it was very interesting because the whole game was built in FMOD, which is crazy because it's only audio only.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
So
We should be doing
yeah. I mean, I
Next.
can maybe find it too. I could show it perhaps. The thing is, the version I have is all in Czech language, but still, I mean, and I could actually maybe show it. Yeah, it's
Okay.
even if
We'll
briefly.
plan another interview. Let's stick to
but the other game the game I always mentioned that was like my truly I don't want to say important because Evidence 111 was also important for me. But the more normal game, so I would say it's Fix Fox, because it was also a game in which I was much more committed and I learned a lot from it. Both games are actually Evidence 111 and Fix Fox were made in the Czech Republic. And I met them because I lived in the Czech Republic for a few years. So I met them there through a conference. Yeah, the guy from Evidence 111, he was in a virtual reality conference in which I was volunteering. And I met him at one of the parties of the conference, and we chatted randomly. And yeah, he months later came to me with, yeah, I have this game, blah blah. Would you like to help me with music? Which I think is a very common occurrence, common thing for us composers and freelance sound designers. But then with Fix Fox, which again it's a much bigger game, and for me it was the one with which I truly learned a lot, and the game that made me say, okay, now I'm a professional composer, because of all the work that went behind it. It got very good reviews. Journalists talked about it and mentioned the music a lot. It was catchy. It was this mix of chip tunes and country and sci-fi, and it was really fitting for me, that project. So that was an important one. The very before and after project, and I met the developer at Global Game Jam, like the one that happened like just a few days ago. Yeah, I was at Global Game Jam in Prague again because I was spending some years there because of an ex-girlfriend. I was living there 5 years. It was, which year was it? It was a few years ago. Yeah, I had a different haircut. I looked like a Beatle. So I went there because I've always been going to the Global Game Jam since I know they exist for between like 10 years or 12 years. 12 years ago, I usually went with Ruben Acebal, which is a friend who now works at Ubisoft Barcelona, which is very cool. We're very good childhood friends. And when I was like around 18, 19, he started to tell me, hey, you make music. There are these events in which people make games, come and help us, blah, blah. There's never people from audio. And I went there, I loved it. I didn't sleep for 2 days, drank too much coffee. That happened for a few years and it became a tradition to me. It was like Christmas. Like there's no way I'm missing it.
That's
so
great.
when I was later in Prague, I was also going there. Like, I don't care. I don't know anyone here, but I just go randomly and chat with anyone like I do in conferences. Usually I love doing that. And yeah, so I went there. I joined two girls that were doing a pixel art game. I've always liked pixel art games a lot. So I joined their team and they were lovely and they were super fun, super nice. We're still good friends. And Yaroslav, who was the developer who later would make Fix Fox, he was a friend of hers. And he was, just coming from time to time, like, hey, how was the game going? During the game jam, I mean, he came to check and talk with us. And I remember chatting with him a couple of times. In that game jam turned out very, very well. It's called Rune Chaos, I think. And I made some chiptunes, sounds, and music for it, 8-bit. And then I think it was like one year later, more or less, that this guy, Yaroslav, randomly emailed me like, hey, I'm making music for this game, and I remember you from the Global Game Jam. Would you like to make music for it? And that's how it happened. Like, it just blew my mind. Like, what the fuck, really? And yeah, that's how I started to learn. That's how these things work a lot. Like, you just meet people, and eventually, in the future, they they come, they need you for things and they think of you. I was surprised he thought of me because it had been like almost a year and we didn't follow up almost at all, I think. But yeah, still, it's the thing with global game jams. Like you make a very good, it's a big impact in terms of, you make a very good impression usually because it's in person, right? So it's very different than everything online.
You mentioned the music system the first time we chatted, and I would love to hear a little bit more about that. I also see these lovely little red rectangles called regions. Aleix.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, first of all, so Iron Crown is a strategy game, right? In which it's a deck builder strategy game. So you have your cards, your deck, and you're using your cards and like planning your turn, and then you start the turn, your hero does movements and attacks, and then the enemy does the same, and then it repeats. So the challenge here was to make it so that the music flows, and it fits the gameplay with when you're thinking, and that it fits the gameplay when the characters are moving and attacking. So the challenge here was to make it interesting when the characters are fighting, but at the same time make it so that it doesn't distract you when you're thinking, because it's a strategy game after all, right? So the ideal solution for this, adaptive music, yay. So I made it so that, well, when you start the level, there is a moment in which you are choosing the cards you will use. And here the music would be like this. Very, very, very sparse, right? So that's very sparse so that you have mental space to think. And then once the game starts, you go from here, you change a parameter, this turn parameter, to planning. And then your turn starts and you start planning your turn. There's a transition. And now you're here. And we're doing this with the little red zones, which are magnet zones, which I've been told is not that usual to use them. I didn't know that.
It's not often that you find somebody go to them because they always think that they can, and they're not wrong. You can do everything with transition regions and markers. However, in some cases like this, I'm sure you're about to explain, this is the best option.
Yeah, I used to use the transition regions, and I like the other kind of approach. I remember I used that a lot, for example, with Fixfox, which I mentioned before, because we also use FMOD. It was more simple than this, but we use that. And I think I started to use this, I don't know when they introduced this feature, but I remember at some point I hadn't used FMOD for, I don't know, a few months. And then when I started to use it for a new project, I was like, okay, let's check what's new in FMOD. Maybe there's something new, there was a new version and all that. And I found this thing, and I always thought, okay, cool, I'll keep that in mind in the future. And then with Iron Crown, seemed like this seemed like the ideal project to start using it, the magnet regions. So what it does is you create a magnet region, right? And then you give it conditions. And then when it meets the conditions, basically the cursor, the head, the playhead, it's called a playhead, will jump. It will attract it like a magnet, and it will just jump here. The cool thing is that you can program it so that you can set it up so that it does this without losing rhythm, while keeping the rhythm. That's a cool thing, and that was critical here because I wanted the music to flow without so that it didn't feel like it's two different tracks, but the same track just growing in intensity.
How do you mean? How did it keep the same rhythm?
Yeah, so that you see, if I'm doing this, if I'm in here, it's like 2, 3, 4. Well, it's on rhythm. Music keeps flowing, and then when it changes. Sorry, actually, that part was not in rhythm. My bad. That was the only part that's not in rhythm. But then when you come from here to other versions of the track, as you can see now, let's say we go to a more active version of this, which I'll explain later. It jumped to another track while still keeping the rhythm, and it can go back. And still keeps the rhythm. So if this has played for like 3 or 4 bars, when it jumps, it also skips those 3 or 4 bars that it has already played. And you can tell it to do it or not. I think it was here, offset. If you set the offset as relative, it kind of keeps it on the same relative spot as the last place, as the last magnet region. You can also do a similar effect with, of course, I guess people watching this have tried this or know about this, that you can do the same, as you can achieve a similar thing if you have different tracks and you simply use automation to change the volume of one track and the other track. Like you could have it so that one automation lowers the volume of this, and then there's a different track here, and then the lower of this track goes up. So while one goes down, the other goes up, and I did that for several other projects. It works well too. But here, to me, it felt much more ordered and easy to see and control when it was like made this way. I think that was the main thing I did, because I didn't want to have like 6 tracks playing at the same time and changing volumes all the time. It felt much easier to control this way. And then also it's easier to plan transitions, for example, from the introduction to any of this, and also from any of this to the ending. There's like an ending when you finish the game.
So just to give an overview. So you've made sure, I've noticed, each one of these pieces of music to be the same length, and obviously the same BPM, as is normally the case. Yeah. And each one is like a different version of the same musical idea, right? So yeah, because you've turned on the inverted offset of the magnet region, if you've gone through 20%, let's say, of one loop, and then you cause it to transition, it will start at the 20% mark of the next loop as well. So it's almost like it's the same piece of music with just instruments coming in and out. And as you rightly said, the alternative is you adding like, I don't know, like 5 or 10 audio tracks and several transition regions for each and every one of these different loops, which is way messier than adding like 6 or 7 magnet regions. Yeah. So 2 things. First, the offset thing you said is a relative, not inverted. I think if it's inverted, it's just kind of the opposite. If you've gone through 20% of it, it jumps to the end, to the later 80% of the track, but doesn't really matter. Small detail. I'd be really interested to see somebody use that, because I haven't found a use case. It's quite. Yeah, me neither. I don't know when you would use that, but it's there. Maybe someday for someone it's useful, hopefully. And yeah, so you could do, so as I said, you could do it with 6 different tracks and playing with the volumes, but then you cannot really, like, you could have it like, like all of these, like having many tracks, well, not in the master, but having like 6 tracks here and then automate it so that you cannot automate the volume so that you play here, and then volume when this is in a certain parameter, the volume is here, and at another parameter, the volume goes down, blah, blah, which I think is a very common thing to do in FMOD, or at least maybe I'm wrong, but I've done it like a million times that way. Just, playing with the volumes of several tracks playing at the same time, but then you don't have transitions between tracks. You cannot add transitions. The only thing you do is just changing the volume of one track and the other. And the other thing is playing with transition regions, have it like this, but instead of magnets, you have transition regions. But with the magnets, it's much easier and clean to set up, I think. Right. So the whole thing. We start with the mulligan phase, it's called. It's when you're choosing your first cards. That's like before actually starting the battle. Very sparse. And I'll change the parameter turn. It's just like this. And then you normally jump to the planning phase. And there will be a transition here. Actually, let me... there will be this small transition here. Now you are in your planning phase, in your turn. Then when you have planned your turn and you start the turn,
it's hero turn. When it's hero turn, there's a folkish percussion added. Tambourine and some percussion. But when it's the enemy turn, it's a heavier percussion. Like taikos and more bigger. And then you normally go back to planning. Right, which is without percussion. But then, when there is action in the game, meaning when there is violence, when you have reached the enemy and you're starting to attack, there's another variable, that's the passive or aggressive mode, which is, well, parameter mode. We have two possibilities, passive and aggressive. Passive is everything we've heard until now. But when it's aggressive, it's fuller, there are more instruments like this. So planning and aggressive is when your character has already attacked, but you are in your planning mode, like you're like thinking your next move. Then when it's a hero turn and it's in aggressive mode, we add the percussion. And when it's enemy turn, there's the other kind of percussion. And eventually, if you haven't attacked for a while, the mode goes back to passive and it lowers in intensity. So what this does is that we have music that really changes a lot based on the situation. It changes a lot in intensity, which was the idea, but at the same time, it never misses a beat. So it's always on time and it never breaks the flow.
I love that. And the transitions are seamless. The music is great, by the way. It has almost kind of like an anime vibe. I'm almost detecting that. Right? That epic hero kind of battle. But
thank you. Yeah, I think to me, it was a bit inspired by Studio Ghibli. There's especially this part here, which I really, really like personally, especially when it's aggressive. Let's say planning. This part.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I was picking up on. So,
based on it's a 6-7-5-1 chord progression. That's very typical from Japanese media and anime, which is the best progression ever, 100% for me.
So based on everything you've just explained, then my next question is, like, how did you decide? How did you realize that you needed to write the music in these sections? Like, how did you have to export the music in this way? Did you go through a few trials and error? And basically, when did Middleware kind of help you figure out how to put the music together?
Yeah, so I had already used FMOD a few times before. And so it was before trying all of this, I knew this, or I was hopeful that this would work. Turned out it worked well. So, but I already knew how I would plan it more or less. Perhaps at the beginning, I wanted to use these transition regions, but then I found out, okay, magnets are better, or I like them more. It feels more orderly with magnet regions. But I already knew how I would do it. And in this game, Iron Crown, there was a lot of planning. There was a lot of talking. I actually personally really, really like how this game was made. I mean, how it's being made. This is still like for demos. This is for the vertical slice. And hopefully I'll do more for this game when they find a publisher, hopefully soon. But the cool thing is that I talked a lot with the developers, and especially with the narrative designer, who coincidentally, Amos Spin, is a very good friend of mine. We ended up both working in the same game, which is absolutely awesome. He's a friend from childhood, actually. So we talked a lot about why the music is like it is, and why does it mean, how does it represent the characters, how does it represent the world, which influences we have. So we talked a lot about that, and at the same time, we also talked a lot how the music could change in the game during the fights, how we wanted the player to feel. And that was very cool because it's the first time I do this next to a narrative designer. A narrative designer is the person who takes care of the narrative of the game. So it's kind of like a game designer, but instead of focusing on the game design or the mechanics, it's focused on the story. And I think as a composer, it's crucial that we talk with these people. Like many indie games don't even have one, but talking with the person who is doing that role, if there's any, it's so good. I'm delighted by how this went, because now every music decision I take is informed by the story, and like everything makes sense as a reason to be there, not just because it sounds cool or I like it, but this represents this is because of this, that. So here we wanted the player to let them think, because it's a strategy game and it's annoying when music is annoying and doesn't let you think, obviously. But at the same time, there's some animations when you're fighting. So we wanted the moments of fight to have this kind of anime feeling, actually, of anime battle, like, wow, yeah, I can do it kind of thing. And that's how, then I was like, okay, the only way to do this I can think of, really, like to play a lot with the FMODs and changing different versions of the music. And to make the tracks, as you also asked how I made that in the DAW, the AW, that was made in Cubase. And I mixed the full version with all the drums, with all the percussion together. And then I exported different versions, taking out instruments. But each one of these versions was later mastered separately, so that the compression added to each of the tracks, it's made for each individual version. And I think, my humble opinion, that's a better result than if you have a lot of different stems from different instruments and then you mix them in FMOD, because this way I have the music already mastered, and every different version sounds as good as it can possibly sound on its own, because it's mastered separately. Still, the mastering was almost very similar for all the versions, so that they don't sound different, like too different between them. But that was the approach, yeah.
Just a really quick follow-up question. Why did you put the victory stinger on a separate audio track?
I don't know. Let me try. Why is it there? I don't know. Maybe just by accident. Let me try. Wait, so if we win. Why do I have it here? Maybe because I was changing the volume of the victory track at some point, and I preferred to just change it here. I guess it was that. I just stayed there.
But I was assuming you were going to say, yeah, that it just gives us more
sorry.
controllability, right? That if you put it on track, you can control that.
Yeah, exactly. I knew all of these would sound the same, but perhaps would make sense if the victory stinger sounds louder, because it's like just you have to communicate the play. Bam, you won. And so it's clear that you won.
Did you want to show us something inside of Unity?
Yeah, I can show this in Unity. All right, so now we are hearing the sparse music of planning. So if we use a card, quite sparse. Now when we move, we'll start hearing the hero layer, like the hero version, passive but moving. Here percussion. Now it went back to the basic mode, to the planning. Now it's an aggressive layer, aggressive version, which is more active. Now it's the enemy version. Now it's planning without percussion, but still active because there's some violence and movement here, so it's still in a high energy level. Right, and now, if we spend a few turns without violence, without aggressivity, the music will go down in intensity. Let me skip a turn. Going down in intensity. Because there's no enemies now, you've spent like a couple turns without fighting, so it goes down in intensity to match the gameplay again. And I have to say, this is like a very early demo of the game, so you can see the slight debug in some parts and all that, so it's just to test it.
No, but it's great because you can also see like, that you're given testing scenes when you're developing a game so that you can try out the sounds in a very simple form. And it's nice. It's nice to be able to now you can go through each stage and each state of the gameplay and test if the music is playing and if it's sounding smooth with the transitions. It's really actually really good insight. Did you implement any of the audio yourself? Did you get into any scripting of that?
Yeah, I did get into some scripting with the help of Alan, the programmer. I love you, Alan. If you're seeing this, you're awesome. He'll see this eventually. I know. And yeah, I did go into that, some of that, some parts with him, some parts without him. Now let me see if I can find something because it's been a few months since we did this. So now I'll share. I'm going to show some of the scripts. Longish script for a composer and sound designer, not for a programmer, probably. And yeah, here we have, for example, here at the end of the script, we are defining which mode we want to use. So again, passive mode is when there is no action, no fighting, when the characters are just moving. So it's more relaxed. But when the moment comes to fight, if you start attacking an enemy or the enemy attacks you, I think it's for 2 turns that when you attack the enemy, the music grows in intensity, and it stays like that until you don't attack for 2 turns, until no one attacks for 2 turns. In this case, here, when this is triggered, start combat music, the parameter mode, here, Runtime Manager, Studio System, set parameter by name, parameter mode is set to 1, which is aggressive mode. Well, aggressive is just a comment that the developer wrote here, well, that we wrote. And then if you miss 2 attacks, meaning there's no attacks for 2 turns, the mode goes back to 0, which is passive mode. So it goes back to slower, less intensity, and then the transition happens in FMOD. So it's a seamless transition. That's one of the things we did. Then, of course, the missed attacks thing, this variable was set up with the help of the programmer. I couldn't do it myself. Well, maybe with a lot of hours, perhaps. But luckily, Alan was helping me to set this up. And on the other hand, we have also other things. For example, here, we have that, well, when you attack, this is the script of attacking. So when you start the script, there is a sound effect of attacking that's triggered, but there's no mystery in that. Let's see if there's anything else from FMOD here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How common has it been in your experience for a composer to do their own scripting?
Nightmare. No, I actually like it. I actually like scripting. It's just,
Does it happen
just something.
Has it happened like every project, or is this a special occasion?
No, it's this occasion. Well, there's some of it. Like, for example, I'm working with a game called Magic Into. There's a little bit of it, but almost nothing. Like the programmer prefers to prepare it for me. So I only have to do like just set the paths in Unity, but I don't really have to write almost any code. And in some cases like this, like in Iron Crown with Alan, we did it together and we had a call or like a conversation, like live, both at the same time on Discord, for example, and we were doing it together. Some things then, once I understood how he has a project organized, I did it myself, some little details. And I like programming. I know a little bit of it, just enough to understand it. I don't think I would be that good like writing things myself, like everything myself. But when I read someone else's code, I know enough to get a feeling of what they're doing. And once you know that, I think implementing FMOD, it's pretty simple and easy. Once you know which lines, I have like notes of, okay, if I want this to happen, I have to write this line of code. It's more about where do I write it rather than what do I write. That's the thing that's hard to figure out in some cases. And that's the main thing. My mental energy goes into where do I write this, I know what I want to do with FMOD exactly. I know which code I need to trigger it, but it's more the question of where do I write it among the whole code and scripts and mess, the whole thing that's there. And also, I think I'm seeing that every programmer does it a bit different, or there are different ways to do it. So like the way they organize the project. So it's always a lot of talking with them, because even if I did this way with Alan with Iron Crown, then Magic Inn, they do it completely different. So I can't just apply the same solution to everyone. I really have to talk with them a lot. And,
Yeah.
and again, talking with them saves me like many hours. Just a short call with a programmer could save me like an entire day of getting crazy. Like, how do I do this?
100%, 100%. It would be like a programmer jumping into our FMOD folders and moving stuff around without asking us first. Like you want to ask permission, and something that I learned, because at the start I was terrified of asking questions for fear of looking stupid or inexperienced. I wish I asked more questions, obvious questions like, where do I find this in Unity, or where is this kept?
Yes.
So a follow-up
You're
question
right.
would be, if there are some composers watching this who want to follow in your footsteps and learn how to do some scripting, where would they go?
Good question. There is some, I think I follow some just, random tutorials on YouTube. I think that, how was he called? Brackes, I think, is a very popular YouTuber, right? Who's doing, or he did, I'm not sure if he still does it, but he has a lot of videos on that. I'm sure you have something there too, probably.
I actually don't. I actually stay clear of scripting because it's not something that I do.
I see. It would be great if you did, actually. It would be great because I know people trust you. So would be, if I was again starting, if I never done this, I would definitely look for something online, and I would start with the people I trust, and you would be one of the first ones for sure. So looking up some tutorials. So check if Sergio has something. If not, just pressure him to do something for whoever is watching this.
Awesome. This is fantastic. Is there anything else you want to add
to the Unity thing, or like the whole call, you mean? Or
I guess in general, it's already been super insightful. I was just wondering if there's something else you wanted to point out in case we missed something.
The thing you said about the talking with the programmers, that's I think a very important point. Like, I know we're talking about FMODs and software, and we like to get good at using this software, but sometimes having the soft skills or more like the confidence, or maybe not confidence, but humility of asking the programmer, hey, I don't know how to do this. I know it's audio related, but it's scripting. I have no idea. Can you help me with this? This is the biggest hack, I think, that there is with implementing audio, just asking others and asking for help, because I've been guilty of that many times. That, especially I'm thinking of Magic Inn, the one I mentioned now, like Xiao, who's the main developer there, the programmer. He told me a couple of times, like, dude, just stop wasting time trying to do it on your own. Just ask me. I'm busy, but still, like, just 10 minutes of my time is like 10 hours of you messing around with trying to find it out,
I don't know about you, but I thought I had to promise the world when I started working with a developer. I thought I had to know everything straight away. So I wouldn't ask for that reason, in case they'd be like, why are you asking me this? Shouldn't you know this? So now I am very clear at the start about where my workflow starts and ends. So, when I ask them a question, they'll expect it. It makes me feel more confident. At least that's helped me at the start. I don't know if you practice that as well, but just being like I stop here. This is where I will ask for your guidance so that we don't, get into confusions or overlap.
Yes. And for me, it was tricky, like you say, like this thing of saying, okay, accepting that I don't know everything. And because I think maybe it's a thing of personality of, I would say, maybe I'm wrong here, but composers especially, if you want to make a living as a composer, maybe a sound designer too, you have to be very good at it, and you have to have the confidence that you're good at it. Otherwise, you don't even try, actually. So we are people that we think, and many people are actually very, very, very good, and we consider ourselves very good at what we do. And maybe that's the kind of personality we have, makes it hard for us to accept we have some deficiencies that we don't know. But in this case, it's normal, because it's programming. It's like literally another whole career. It's another world. We cannot really know like the massive world of music, the massive world of sound design, and the massive world of programming entirely perfectly, because not even programmers know it. If you talk with programmers, they'll tell you that they spend their day Googling how to do things. So not even they know everything. So the thing I would recommend to people starting with this is to, learn what you can, but also, like, when you work with people, really be humble and ask for help, because that's going to save you so much time, man.
I love it. I love it. Aleix, thank you so much for this. This was fantastic. You were great. Thank you very much.
No, thanks to you. I was so happy to be here and so humbled actually to be in a video about FMOD. There's so much I still have to learn about it. I'm so glad I could share some of what I've done so far. And there's still a lot I have to learn. So thank you for having me here.
And that's it. Thank you very much for joining me on another FMOD deep dive interview. I love giving these, by the way. It was a pleasure to have Aleix and to hear his insights on how he got into game audio composition and how he's also getting involved in the scripting, which is really, really curious to hear. And more importantly, some fantastic music for the game Iron Crown. I hope you take even one little bit of inspiration from this interview to apply to whatever project or study you're currently engaged in. Aside from that, I will see you in the next deep dive interview.